up on Primetime News, Korea announces a stimulus package that pumps billions of dollars into the economy. The spending plan is expected to give a much-needed boost, but also raise the government debt. Ahead of Sunday's crucial referendum over creditors' bailout terms, major rallies supporting either a yes or no result take place in Athens. And the 2015 Summer Universiade kicks off here in Korea. More than 13,000 young athletes from around the world gather to give their best in each sporting discipline. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello and welcome to Primetime News on this Friday, July 3rd. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us.
Korea has unveiled a multi-billion-dollar stimulus package as the country scrambles with falling exports and the fallout from the MERS outbreak.
The government will hand the spending plan to the National Assembly next Monday. Our Shin Se-min tells us why and how this move makes sense.
The Korean government will inject $19.6 billion worth of stimulus funds into the flagging economy in the second half of the year as it aims to hold the country's economic growth rate in the 3% range. Of that, $10.5 billion of supplementary budget has been set aside to deal with Korea's most pressing issues.
The extra budget should help stabilize the livelihoods of ordinary people who have been affected the most by the MERS outbreak and to prevent a sharp drop in consumer spending.
From the supplementary budget, $5.5 billion will directly go to counter losses from the MERS outbreak and the ongoing drought. And the remaining amount will cover tax revenue shortfalls for this year caused by the slowing economy.
The timing and amount of the budget seems sufficient to quickly put the economy back on the recovery track, as its role is to deal with the most pressing matters.
The extra spending is estimated to raise the economic growth rate by 0.3 percentage points this year and 0.4 in 2016. Still, concerns linger over the country's fiscal soundness as the finance ministry plans to sell $8.5 billion worth of new treasury bonds to fund the extra budget.
By issuing new treasury bonds, Korea's fiscal soundness may be damaged and potentially drag down the economy, as the country will have to pay back years later.
The extra expenditure will raise the government debt to 37.5% of GDP this year, up nearly 2 percentage points from last year. Experts also point out that it's critical for the country's government to push through its structural reform efforts on top of the extra budget to help sustain the country's economic growth in the long run. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Putting the ongoing internal disputes in respective parties on hold, the delayed House Steering Committee meeting involving the ruling's Haenuri Party, the main opposition and presidential officials got underway this Friday. Our Park Ji-won has more.
Embattled ruling party's floor leader Yoo Seung-min chaired Friday's House Steering Committee meeting session to oversee the presidential secretariat.
The meeting adopts the budget settlement on the Presidential Secretariat's closing accounts for the 2014 fiscal year.
Friday's meeting also marked the first encounter between Yoo and Presidential Chief of Staff Lee Byung-gi since President Park vetoed the controversial revision of the National Assembly Act last week. At that time, President Park harshly criticized Yoo and his role in the revision of the parliamentary law, calling it politics of betrayal. Since then, the floor leader has been facing mounting pressure within his own party to resign for causing a rift between the presidential office and the ruling party. This first encounter, however, was not as tense as many anticipated. Presidential Chief of Staff Lee avoided any direct comment on whether Yoo should resign, and rather he urged the Assembly's cooperation on the supplementary budget bill.
The supplementary budget plan was approved during today's cabinet meeting, and it will be submitted to the Assembly soon. We hope the Assembly passes the budget bill at the earliest possible moment.
The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy, for their part, heard questions to the president's secretaries over the veto of the revised parliamentary law, which would have allowed lawmakers to request revisions to government decrees. The opposition also criticized the presidential office for exerting influence over the National Assembly by pressing the ruling party's floor leader to step down. In response, Chief of Staff Lee stressed that the presidential office has never looked down on the parliament, and the president's previous remarks criticizing you and the assembly were out of her sincere wish that the parliament should work above all on improving the lives of the people. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Seoul has dismissed Pyongyang's accusation that South Korea is advocating the deadly naval clash between the two Koreas in the West Sea. South Korea's Unification Ministry said Friday that Pyongyang should refrain from unreasonably interfering in Seoul's social issues and reflect on its own internal situation instead. Pyongyang state-run Korean Central Television reported Thursday that South Korea is driving the Korea Peninsula closer to war after Defense Minister Han Min-gu's speech on Monday, marking the 13th anniversary of the Second Battle of Yeonpyeong, in which he vowed to sternly retaliate against any provocations from the north. The U.S. government says it's urging Japan to swiftly resolve the issue of Tokyo's wartime sexual enslavement of women. That's what officials at the U.S. State Department told Kim Bok-dong, a survivor of Japan's wartime sex slavery, during a meeting in Washington on Thursday. Citing a civic activist traveling with Kim, Seoul's Yonhap News Agency reports that the officials expressed hopes for the issue to be resolved and added that President Barack Obama holds a clear stance about the matter. Kim, who is currently on a week-long trip to the United States to raise awareness about the so-called comfort women issue, is one of just 49 surviving victims in Korea.
Now, shifting gears, Korea is vowing to create a sound environment for investors to open up their wallets for startups. It pledged to promote merger and acquisitions in the startup industry. Our Connie Kim has the details.
Korea will create a solid startup ecosystem, making it easy for investors to pull back their investments in startups. That by encouraging startups to go through merger and acquisitions. This was the main message from the country's Deputy Prime Minister Choi Kyung-hwan on Friday during a creative economy meeting with corporate and government officials. Currently, retrieving investment is difficult in Korea, as investors would have to wait for a startup to go public or go through the initial public offering process to earn profits from their initial investment. Choi went on to say that in the new normal of weaker growth, the government's creative economy is the only way for the country to strive in the global market. The number of venture capitals exceeded 30,000 for the first time in May, and the software and big data industries have been growing at an annual 20 to 30% rate. And as part of efforts to nurture startups, Choi said the government will spearhead all efforts to establish the so-called Pangyo Creative Economy Valley, also dubbed the future of Korea's high-tech industry, by the summer of 2017. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
In other news, Korea's foreign exchange reserves have posted a record high for the third straight month in June. The Bank of Korea says the country's forex reserves stood at $374 billion as of the end of June, up about $3 billion on month. The central bank also says the surge is due to the appreciated value of other currencies, with the euro gaining 2.2% against the greenback and the British pound up by 2.7%. It also added that the increased profit from asset management contributed to the hike. The size of Korea's foreign exchange reserve ranked 6th in the world in May, with China topping that list, followed by Japan.
Now, some updates on the bus crash in China that killed 10 Koreans and a Chinese driver. Victims' families are now arriving in the northeastern Chinese city of Jian, site of the accident. According to our Kim Min-ji, CCTV footage recorded at the scene has been released, hopefully providing clues as to what caused the accident.
Bereaved family members are arriving at a funeral hall in the Chinese city of Jian, set up for 10 Koreans who were killed in a bus crash earlier this week. They will meet with the Korean government's emergency response team dispatched to the area to discuss how to transfer the bodies back to Korea, as well as compensation and other related issues regarding the accident. The wounded have been moved to a hospital in northeast China's Jilin province to receive intense treatment. Local doctors say among the 16 injured, 1 is in critical condition, while 7 are seriously wounded. The victims were among Korean government employees who were on a training trip to China. The Korean consulate in Shenyang has set up a situation room in a hotel in the province to help deal with the aftermath of the accident.
China is disturbed about this accident and doing its best to find the exact cause.
Although an investigation is currently underway, witnesses are pointing to driver error as the cause of the accident. CCTV footage shows the bus making a sharp turn and crashing into a pier before eventually veering off the bridge. Chinese officials say it may have been caused by driver inexperience, but have not ruled out other possible causes, including mechanical errors. 11 people were killed after a bus carrying 28 people veered off a bridge and plunged 15 meters into a river in the city of Jian on Wednesday. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
An explosion at Hanwha chemical plant this morning claimed 6 lives. Officials from the fire department said the accident happened around 9:16 a.m. at one of Hanwha's factories in the southern city of Ulsan when a storage tank containing factory waste suddenly exploded. The blast killed 6 workers at the site and injured a security worker surnamed Choy. Later, officials from Hanwha Chemicals said they suspect the accident occurred while the workers were welding the tank. A spark from the construction work ignited the gas. Hanwha apologized and offered compensation to the victims' families, adding they will do their best to prevent similar accidents in the future.
Let's turn to the latest on the MERS outbreak in Korea. Health authorities say more than a dozen patients have recovered from the virus. This, along with other factors, hints at improvements in the current situation on many levels. Our Kim Ji-hye explains further.
The health ministry says Friday 25 people who have contracted MERS from secondary infection have fully recovered from the virus. Only 5 MERS patients who had contracted the virus due to close contact with the country's first confirmed patient have died. With this, the country no longer has a living MERS patient that have contracted the virus through secondary infection, which occurs through a direct or close contact with the first confirmed patient. It's seen as a major achievement in how the country is handling the outbreak and containing further spreading. Among those recovered were an active source of tertiary infection called superspreaders that spreaded the virus to other regions. For example, patient 14 infected more than 80 people at the Samsung Medical Center in southern Seoul after he himself contracted the virus from the first confirmed patient in Pyeongtaek. Patient 14 and 24 others are receiving medical treatment in a general ward or have already been discharged from hospitals, putting weight on the perspective that an infection isn't necessarily deadly and that it can be treated. The second confirmed patient, the wife of the first confirmed patient, recovered from the virus 41 days after contracting the virus. So far, at least 109 people have been discharged from hospitals as they recover from the virus, while nearly 1,500 people have been released from quarantine or home isolation. Kim Ji-hye, Arirang News.
On to some global sporting event news. The largest Universiade in history is being held in the southwestern Korean city of Gwangju. President Park Geun-hye officially opened the games where thousands of athletes will compete and push each other to reach new heights. Our Kim Hyun-bin files this report all the way from Gwangju.
The opening ceremony of the 2015 Hwang Universiade kicked off on Friday, welcoming spectators from all over the world.
I'm from the Netherlands. I'm here to visit a friend of mine. He's competing in rowing, and I really like this place here. Gwangju is a great place to stay. Really like the atmosphere.
President Park Geun-hye, accompanied by other government officials, attended the ceremony to show support and declared the official start of the event.
빛의 도시 대한민국 광주에서 세계의 젊음이 함께하는 제28회 광주 하계 유니버시아드 대회 개회를 선언합니다.
This year's Universiade is the largest in the 56-year history of the sporting event. surpassing the previous record set in the Russian city of Kazan 3 years ago. Some 13,000 athletes from 145 countries are set to compete in Gwangju. Organizers say this is more than just an athletic event that will be very beneficial for the city.
This is the largest international event Gwangju has ever hosted. Roughly 100 foreign media will broadcast to 500 million people, promoting the city and enhancing Korea's international status.
South Korea has sent in its largest Universiade delegation ever. 516 athletes and officials partaking in all 21 sporting categories for the summer event. If everything goes to plan, Team Korea says expects to scoop 25 gold medals for an overall third place in the medal standings. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News, Gwangju.
Time now to take a look at what's making headlines around the world with our Kwon So-hwa at the News Center.
So let's start with the Greece debt crisis. We've been talking about the bailout referendum throughout the week, and now the vote is just around the corner.
Yes, Greeks have not much time to decide as the vote is planned for Sunday, but it's still not 100% set. There are still chances of a delay as Greece's top court needs to give the green light for the vote, as some human rights bodies say it, quote, falls short of international standards.
Understandably so, as the referendum comes at very short notice. So as of now, how is the vote predicted to turn out?
Well, Ji-hye, that's a quite tough question because earlier this week, polls showed more no votes, but the latest results show a tight race. Now, while the Greek government is going all out to convince people to vote no, some think otherwise.
I am very worried, but I am optimistic. I think that at the last moment, everyone is going to vote yes. It is a difficult choice to vote yes. Things will not be easy at all. However, I can't see a future outside Europe.
Now, some are upset about having the vote itself, as thousands of people protested in central Athens Thursday in support of the Communist Party, which says both yes or no votes will lead to anti-people measures.
Next Monday, the government will either clinch anew a brutal agreement or our exit from the euro will start. Whichever of the two happens, it is our people who will go bankrupt.
Meanwhile, the International Monetary Fund released a report that could have a pivotal impact on Greece's bailout referendum. It sent a strong message to the Eurozone saying Greece's debt needs to be restructured and cut. It says Greece needs between 50 to 60 billion euros of extra funds over the next 3 years and large-scale debt relief to create a breathing space and stabilize the economy. Eurozone ministers are still ruling out any bailout talks with Athens until after the referendum. And a minute of silence has been held across the United Kingdom to pay tribute to the victims of the terrorist attack in Tunisia last week. But respect was not only paid in the UK, but also in countries across Asia, such as Korea, as well as in Japan, where flags at respective British embassies were lowered to half-mast.
30 British victims have been confirmed dead, many more injured. Other nationalities have been affected too. As a message to terrorists, it's quite straightforward. Terrorism will not win.
38 foreigners, most of them British, were killed in last Friday's attack at the Tunisian resort of Sousse when a gunman opened fire. The Islamic State group claimed responsibility for the attack. And staying with Britain, but on to different matters, British oil giant BP has agreed to pay the largest environmental fine in U.S. history for the 2010 Gulf of Mexico oil spill. The company will cough up $18.7 billion in penalties to the U.S. government and 5 states to resolve nearly all claims from the so-called Deepwater Horizon disaster. Son Jung-in has more.
It's considered the worst oil spill in U.S. history. On April 20, 2010, the Deepwater Horizon oil rig exploded and sank 1,600 meters to the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico, gushing unimaginable amounts of oil into the sea. At the time, U.S. President Barack Obama said BP should be held to account for the ecological devastation.
The American people should know that from the moment this disaster began, the federal government has been in charge of the response effort. As far as I'm concerned, BP is responsible for this horrific disaster.
BP and U.S. authorities finally managed to cap the well 3 months after the accident, but only after a staggering 650 million liters of oil spilled into the Gulf damaged the economy and environment of Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas.
And frankly, with this oil spill, went beyond just physical damage. We were threatening ways of life, how people had been grown up and how they were raised.
After more than 5 years, BP on Thursday agreed to pay $18.7 billion in penalties to the U.S. government and the 5 states to resolve nearly all federal and state litigations. The agreement is on top of the $43.8 billion BP has already set aside for criminal and civil penalties and cleanup costs. It's the largest settlement ever reached with a single corporation in U.S. history.
I'm proud to report that our state not only helped lead this historic effort, but negotiated a landmark agreement on behalf of the people of Florida.
BP plans to pay the amount over the course of 18 years. The disaster killed 11 workers and countless animals. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
And those were the international headlines we're following at this hour. Good night.
It was a hot Friday today, and it was just a sneak peek of what seems to be a scorching weekend. Daily highs in the capital will soar to 30 on Saturday and Sunday under a fair amount of sunshine. But there is a slim chance of sudden showers in the central parts of the country, including Gyeongsang-do provinces. But in the meantime, the rest of the country will need to prepare extra sun protection for the weekend. UV levels will be very high across much of the country, so be sure to apply a good amount of sunblock and try to avoid being outside for too long, especially between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. when UV rays are the strongest. And now taking a closer look at the readings for tomorrow. Seoul rises to 30, Daegu and Gwangju hit 27 and 29, while Busan tops out at 25. And as for the other parts, it seems like Daejeon and Jeju Island will see a high of 29 and 24, while Dokdo rises to 22. Now, the 9th typhoon of the season, Cheonham, and the 10th typhoon of the season, Linfa, have developed, and Cheonham could possibly hit the Korean peninsula and Northeast Asia by next week. Well, that's all up for Korea, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
It's going to be hard to say goodbye to those kind of traditional methods, but of course, although they're gone, they will forever be remaining. They will forever have a special place in some people's hearts. We've come to the end of our newscast for this week. Thank you so much for staying with us. This has been Daniel Choy.
And I'm Hwang Ji-hye. Have a great weekend and do join us at the same time next week. Goodbye for now.